thank you for joining the second panel, the final panel for today. Hopefully, you're not too much cooked already in the heat. Also, we've had a lot of great discussions, and a lot of topics have already been discussed. So in some ways, we're going over the similar ground, but nevertheless, hopefully we can add some more perspectives here as well from our fantastic panel. I would really first say a few words of introduction, then I would like to ask each of the panelists also to just introduce themselves. You probably don't need a lot of introduction anymore from previous, but nevertheless. And then we will look at different perspectives. So we heard the topics, quite a wide-ranging things from open data to policy, right? What I would like us to do is consider a world of information about materials. So it's split into many different disciplines. Within that world, we can identify those that produce data, people and machines, yeah, those that manage the data, and those that need the data, which we will call the data consumers. And this is, we are now well familiar with that. We've heard already the non-technical barriers. Everyone wants to consume data. Nobody wants to actually make them available for consumption. So we will discuss that. And I would like us to discuss what happens along this part. What are the main pain points? What works today? What is still missing technically, organizationally, and what realistic steps we could take? This is really going to be, I think that step, the realistic step, could be a key topic for us now as a final panel to consider. Also like to consider it from the perspective mostly, first of all, of the people, right? What does it look like for the people? And then more from the perspective of the system, the digital infrastructure, the organization, standards, the policy, and so on. So first of all, looking at the people. But before I do that, just very briefly again, introduce yourself and what you are.
Okay, I start. I'm Ennio Capria, Deputy Head of Business Development at the ESRF. Basically, the group I belong to is the group in charge for all activity at the interface with industry. And of course, I'm super interested to this topic because we need to plan the needs of industry in the future. This is definitely going to happen. And so we want to be ready when there will be convergence between what we can offer and the need will be there. And that's the reason why mainly I'm interested to this. Of course, we are a data producer, a very massive data producer, and all our data are already fair. We have data policy in place. But one thing is that what we want to do and our ambition, and one thing is the impact we're going to get after. So that's why I'm super interested by this community.
Hello everyone, Marek Cebecauer from Czech Academy of Sciences and the Herovsky Institute. My role in this institute is open science officer, but I am kind of father of the data management in this institute. I'm, as you heard already during the discussions, that I'm trying to convince my colleagues to use better systems and to produce better data. In the Czech Republic, I'm actually a chair of a MatCH working group, which is the community of material science and engineering researchers, so mainly very, very little industry involvement yet, but there is already, and also an ambassador of a Research Data Alliance, and in the same domain. And this is why I'm here probably to share with you the knowledge from national, but also from a global perspective.
Okay, maybe not to say additional much more, just one fact maybe of interest. Before being full stack digital infrastructure engineer, I did a PhD in experimental materials engineering, and I pushed out 3 publications. I did not take care about FAIR at all. So I at least have one episode in my history where I was the classic PhD we want to convince now to do different.
thank you very much for the interest. I would like to then go back maybe to Ennio. As a large infrastructure, you obviously have this systematic view that we will discuss in a minute, but you have the actual user at your facilities, right? So looking at it from the people that actually use the facilities, what is it that, let's say, currently in a system like that, not now thinking of the individual labs, the smaller lab, like what you're doing, what actually works well for them today, what is still creaking, and what is going to be changing also through AI and so on. So can we please comment?
Okay, what's working well is metadata. We have electronic logbooks. Everyone is obliged to put metadata in if they want to use the data, if they want to analyze the data, metadata has to be there. In this sense, everybody can see the return on the investment of their time. And also, since there is a new logbook that is being designed in a way that you need to enter your metadata in order to do your calibration, in order to do everything, that's working very well. Those metadata are going to label the raw data, and the raw data are the ones that are going to be open to the world after 3 years on public experiment. Of course, then we have confidential experiment given in a commercial base to companies. In this case, these are out of the data policy, these are confidential, and more or less they decide what they want and how they want to proceed. But for public beam time, public data, this is what is happening. On the analyzed data, then is the jungle, because there is not a set of rules. Depends from the good willing of basically of the user, of the scientist, and there we fall technically in the white paper territory that was explained before, where there is all sorts of cases, and yeah, is the jungle.
So it's basically where you go from your instrument controlled metadata world into the application metadata.
Exactly. Is exactly this.
Yeah.
When we move from the data production to the data analysis, data interpretation, then is outside our framework, which has been established, that works well, and where there is a tangible advantage in working within the workflow. And we also developed a system called EWOX, with some workflows on the beamline for the data visualization and inline data in integration and etc. And clearly, if you follow the workflow, the advantage is gigantic. So it will be crazy not to do it.
So we will iterate a few. We do it agile, right? We iterate a few things. Let's stay with really at the source. So we are really producing data from the instrument. We don't care yet about the analysis. Now, we can see this works. Now you go to the institute level, where we also have many people doing particular testing type of, so you could say it's distributed, but nevertheless, they're all doing nano indentation, let's say. What is transferable, and why is it not working at the institute level in a similar way? Maybe for you in your institute as well.
No. I think now our institute is a very good example where it works to some extent, but where it doesn't work. I've seen the output in our institute in 2025, which was from an inkjet printer annotated with a pencil, and there was a photography, and this photography went to the journal, and the journal accepted it. It was electrochemistry curve. I was shocked, but this is the reality from our very old professor. It's probably super science, high quality science in terms of electrochemistry, but from what we discussed today, it's a disaster. The difference is very simple. The large infrastructure you have, no one can have in their own lab. So to have an access to this very expensive infrastructure, you have to follow the rules. We have the same even with a smaller. This is a huge example, but even in Brno, for example, we have some electron microscopes which are so special that it's very difficult to buy it for your own lab. Of course, if you want to just to measure Raman spectrum or visual spectrum, you can do it in your lab, because these kind of spectrometers are spectrophotometers are everywhere, and then it's very difficult to convince people, to convince especially the PI, that they should do it, because once PI is convinced, then it usually, at least in our institution, it works better. But if PI is not convinced, then you have to go through actually the student, because the younger generation is a little bit more open to better data management and open science, and that works very slowly, and they do it in the kind of in their free time, and so on and so on. So this is what is the big barrier, are actually PIs who don't see added value which exists, which you can prove. I can to some extent prove it, but just with the policy, because we are the first institute in Czech Academy of Science which implemented research data management policy, that doesn't work for the bench. For the everyday life, it's a good because you have what to build on, but it's not sufficient.
Like to add anything from your experience? Otherwise, I mean, maybe also you can answer that plus a little bit more. When I think someone in talking about ELNs, there are also different types of ELNs already formatted for different instruments and so on. I think this is one maybe approach where this could be improved to have like basically a pre-designed catalog that uses instrument data, because there are something like 100 methods in material science, right? So it's not like an infinite number. It's not even a very high number, yeah. Of course, there are different flavors of it. So it is possible to create something that is reproducible or not.
I think at least they are countable. So it's yeah. But I think maybe to summarize, I guess scientists are driven from the device manufacturer defined workflow to the undefined post-processing and analysis workflow. And if the research infrastructure is so large that many people use the same, then we have some standardization leverage. And my question to Ennio, if you provide us like a post analysis script that makes visuals of the beamline data, do the people use it? Because how much is the adoption rate?
That's a very good question, because historically, and in this I have to say, I'm at the ESRF since 30 years, and I could see something like it seems what was the last decade I was there was completely different. When I arrived at the ESRF in 2013, if you spoke about data analysis, people were starting to beat you. We don't do data analysis. Data analysis, the users take the data and do the analysis. We don't want to deal with it. After 5 years, we actually should do that analysis. Otherwise, the user don't use the data. They don't produce with the data. And so we produce data that are just sitting in some drawers. And in this, we started building some package like for diffraction, for spectroscopy, and etc. Those packages are used by some users, but as soon as we have some more skilled one, they have their Python script that do better. And so every beamline has his own Python script that, of course, don't speak with the beamline that is just next door. So when to go with what you're saying, yes, but these are not the user more naive, unfortunately. Is when we enter the expert mode. The more disciplined are the ones that are completely new to the technique, that they just had a very good sample. They need the ESRF to get good results, so we can format it from the beginning, saying, you use this thing, I train you, and then you collect the data in this way, you publish, And they're so there is also these effects of having a proper naivety and a deconstruction. The expert that has his little fingers that can write the easiest Python script is off spec all the time and off standard. Today, we start with the AI. And I have to tell you that the person that today is more or less in average doing 8 meetings per day with 8 different working groups working on AI, 3 years ago said AI will never happen. AI is just a hoax. AI and now is a super advocate. So these are 13 years.
Just wanted quick to add, I think this is now maybe the common observation that if someone is not yet branded, so that means that he has an established workflow, he is still open for suggestions for a workflow. So I think that's what is true for the students in general. So you're a young material scientist student, you do have no idea, you have no workflow to do the experiment because you're just learning it. And then I think the point is who explains you what is a good way to do it. And maybe it's the one who has some idea of fair data and so on. But once you have a workflow established and it kind of works, then you're deep into this. There's no time, there's no priority to change the process. And I think, but now I think the AI is a double challenge because it speeds up for us to create new reference workflows, great. But also it helps everyone who just wipe codes his own script and not following any guidance. So it's yeah, double-sided.
I just wanted to add that this is a nice position to help those for data stewards. And now I don't mean institutional data stewards. Actually, I managed to get 1 data steward per 10 researchers in our institute. Again, the quality varies of the data stewards, but those who are really good, they are really accelerating the good data management. Again, human in the loop is very important, even though later AI and lab books and workflows are implemented. At the beginning, there should be a person, human being, which helps the researchers to kick off.
Yeah, but yeah, absolutely. Still, I would like to. This is something maybe I hadn't quite thought so much about this before, but I think a takeaway here is data analysis Wild West is, that lies between the data production and the data management. I mean, I said data production, which is obviously very simplified data lifecycle, but there is this in between, right, which is a complete free for all and quite a dangerous thing, because in the end, for provenance aspects and so on, if you cannot follow that back, then you also have a question of what is the data, etc. We'll come to you, Jesper, in a minute. There will be
yeah. So very quick comment. So I would say if we aside something like a synchrotron, we also have Wild West on the data on the characterization side, because then you have 5 or 10 different vendors for the same instrumentation, and they create different different formats. They have different ways to create metadata, and so the databases even is diverging, and then the workflows on top of them diverging even more. So I think if there are common formats, it's also much easier to provide a common workflow for the standard data analysis. But not having even a common format of the raw data makes it really challenging. As you see this a lot in battery research, you have this 10 cycler manufacturer, and it's a mess regarding the data, even if it's very simple data.
I think Jesper wanted to add something, so we need the third microphone.
Quick question to you, Marek. You said your data stewards a good one. Yes, some are good. They really created much better data management. Is that improved data management perceived by the researchers as improved research, better quality, faster research, or is it the benefit really visible?
Yes, the benefit is visible in metadata. How it is with the data, unfortunately, I cannot answer your question because that's discipline specific. But in terms of metadata, it's much better because there is more ELN implementation or other tools, workflows, and that means that the data are very well described, or there is a gradient from 0 to very well, yeah. But in publications, well, because then you, for example, in one group there is a lady from Mexico, wonderful person, and she convinced everyone, the 16 people in a relatively big lab, but it is supported, it is fully supported by the PI. This is always needed. But she convinced that all these 16 researchers who didn't publish any data in 2021, since 2022 published 25 data sets. Most of them are reasonably well described. Of course, not everything is perfect because of the problem I mentioned, that there is a gap between ELN and the repository. But it's improving on a daily basis. But thanks to this data, Stuart.
So we now come to the data manager. What can we say about the data manager? Other than the first thing I would have, I mean, I put it down, right? I have, who even is the data management manager? Does this person even exist?
We have a department, not data manager, of course, on the side of the facility. Then you have the data owner on the side of the user. And the data ownership has been very well regulated in terms of responsibility, duties, and expectation in our data policies. And I mean, it's a department of 20 people today, where we a very big chunk of things are related with data storage, of course. We have a policy. Basically, at the ESRF, every time you start an experimental session, you already generate a DOI, and everything and the flow is followed, which is a bit of a problem sometimes with industrials, because we give the industrial the possibility not to have any data on our systems, so we have to kind of bypass the entire system. But we have the procedure in place. It's just to explain you how the workflow is working, and why we don't have a data manager like a figure per se, because the process is already established since day one. So storage and the workflows, the EWOCs, very, very important. And then we have all the pipeline of the experiment, which includes also the arrival of the sample on site. So everything is tracked from the sample arriving and with the security check to the data archived on tape from the day in which we generate the experiment. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I guess it's the same reflection of what we said before. Everything that's in control of your instrument and so on is very well managed. Data are managed and so on. So what happens to the management of the analyzed data is another question.
Yeah, because it's the jungle. There is with the user, and the user whatever.
Yeah. I wanted actually to add, and your question is very good. Who is a data manager? Because there could be hundreds of answers. Who is it? In our institution, there could be two ways. Once, for example, we are building the repository with the metadata model. So the person who is defining the data structure from application profile for semantic profile is, in our case, called data engineer or data manager. Then sometimes in some groups they use a word for data processing. That's the data manager. But I heard it in so many situations that I can't answer your question.
Yeah, I would maybe to add at least two examples. I think one is the project data manager who makes the DMP and then maybe enforces the DMP, which is typically largely underfunded because he needs to deal with the whole consortium, and he needs to manage the data that's already produced and thrown at the other consortium members. And the other data manager is the one who would actually work at the institute and has a mandate from the PIs, from the head of institute, and it's then more his job to establish this in the actual work independently from projects.
I think you're mentioning a very important point here in terms of the projects. We discussed it before with the data management plan. Was that in a way it's interesting, you know, why projects have data management plan but not data management plan implementation tasks, right? So there's always a plan and there's never an implementation. Well, hardly ever, because I mean it's not a requirement of a data manager as such, you know, in my view.
Yeah, so one comment, not even in the project, but ideally the data manager in the project would coordinate with the data manager at the partner institutes and not with every single scientist. But yeah.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say, that we in Czech system, the operating program, Jana Namoskomeski, there is implementation is requirement by the funder in one Czech system. No, in Horizon Europe I've never seen it, but in one of the Czech funders.
And on the other hand, I'm always, you know, have to bring it up here, intrigued as we, you know, by the long-standing data management of the crystallography community, right? That goes back to the mid-60s. So all of the, you know, crystal structure data have been managed for, yeah, I mean, 60 years plus.
But it's funny because in biological community, they call them data annotators. It's just a mess of the names.
Similarly, I mean, there are, yeah, so, I mean, there are communities, protein data, gene data. I mean, there are communities around particular topics that do have a data management. Maybe that's already coming to the second part of the systematic way. So let's first look at the data consumer. I guess does anything work for the data consumer? So before that is what works and then a few things that don't work. Now maybe it's a bit the other way around.
What works with the data consumer is that they acquire very good data. They do nice publications, and so far, when there were some situation where we had to recover the data, we could manage to do that. So I would say that for the last century, we cannot complain. The problem is that if we think about machine readable data sets, we are completely on the other side. So in this moment, but this is going to be the ambition for the future. So on this side, I would say nothing work, unfortunately. But it's not for them. It's the famous is the next one. They will get the advantage of us working well today. So in this, I have to admit that there's no request, there's no liability, there's no incentive, if not a sense of responsibility and a vision and a sense of sacrifice as well, and that's in the form of generosity for the next generation. That's the only thing I could see as a driver today.
First, I was very surprised when you said that the raw data are all fair, which was very, I'm confused if they are really interoperable and really reusable. in full meaning of these words. But actually in our institute, it's very, because you said at the beginning that the data consumers, that's clear. In our institute, this was actually the unclear part of our data management plans, because the first question was asking, what data do you reuse? And in the first year of implementation of these plans, literally all answers were wrong. Everyone answered about that their data could be reused, even though they use crystallography databases. I don't know what other resources. No one mentioned this, that they are actually building on their own data. Next year, we've got first improvements with that they are using all their own old data for calibration, comparison, and so on. And only in the third year, we really got the correct answers that they are using this kind of database, that kind of resources, and of course only with few of our researchers. So I actually and when you ask how they reuse data, what is their incentive, except of these very basic databases, which are known and in chemistry used a lot. In our institute, surprisingly, no one really uses the large bunch of data which you would do as some comparative study. No, unfortunately, no.
I would agree that often data is not reused because it's not reusable, so it's kind of a chicken egg problem. And when it's reusable, then because it's a data element has so significant importance for a community like protein structures. I mean, if you're doing protein research, this is your main subject. But it's not the same that you say the tensile test is all for the materials engineering. So there are so many different characterizations that need a proper data format. So the costs maybe are similar to standardize them, but the benefit is largely different in protein research and materials engineering in general. So the question is, can we reduce the cost to adapt a standard? Then we may see this, what's happening in these other domains as well. But I mean, we all dream of being a materials engineer for, I don't know, only composite material and say, let's compare 10,000 research papers on composite materials' mechanical properties. So we cannot do, and the only access way is, I mean, is to do a lot of manual effort, paper per paper, right until now. Maybe LLMs are now changing this, yeah.
Oh yeah, maybe I wanted to comment on this aspect. Reusable, I would think that in principle, yes. Now, if someone will reuse it or not, that's I can also cite some particular case where the reuse is quite common. We have the example of the Human Organ Atlas, where we are more or less doing what in the astronomy world is done. We have groups coming with some human organs in a bag, and they do 3D imaging of this. They put it on the cloud, and the entire world is analyzing this data and publishing. Interoperable, it's a very good question, because as a time flag intrinsic, they are interoperable today, will be interoperable in 5 years, in 10 years. It's like when I had my MS-DOS computer, where with my diskette and with the software that is in the computer is always working, but if I plug it on the net, it's not working anymore. And what I want is also to say is that today, when I need 3 hours to acquire a petabyte of data that I have to store for 10 years minimum, someone starts thinking, do we really need to store raw data? Can we not store the sample and maybe remeasure it, which will cost for the entire infrastructure much less than maintaining 1 petadata equivalent of 3 hours of acquisition? So that's a real question. For now, our data policy is on raw data, so we will not touch. But what happened in the future, I don't know.
I just wanted to say that interoperable also in the meaning that is, for example, a social scientist or a computer scientist who has no idea about the sample, because this is interoperable in a full meaning. Sorry for going into the details. Yeah, but actually I can say an example from biological imaging. Light sheet also, light sheet microscopy in biological samples produces terabytes, sorry, not petabytes, terabytes in hours. And the decision of the community was not to store raw data at all, because very often, especially with the organs, with embryos of fruit flies, which is a very common object in this field, it's easier to simply remeasure. That's one thing. Other thing, sorry for taking time, I had a friend who is doing similar stuff, and he told me, I have a lizard, I did an imaging of a lizard, and should I also delete the raw data? So I asked him, how many times in your life you've seen this lizard? And he said once. So please store the data.
Okay, so before, as a segue also to the systematic part now, thinking about the Materials Commons project, right, and priorities for the field, you are tasked to organize the FAIR letters in order of priorities. So FAIR or RIAF? What is the other combination? Go ahead. Each one.
F for me for sure, because it's what is opening is opening for the AI after, and the API and everything.
I would say T. I know it's not there. I have somewhere representation on trustworthy data, and that's the T, that the data must be trustworthy and not just very fair.
Also know an extension with this E for executable. So, but yeah, but I will agree, if you never find it, you will never reuse it.
So we have FET rather than findable, executable, and trustworthy. Okay, well, that's some outcome of this panel. There we go. Repeat.
So it's just, if you talk about digital data and a particular workflow script, then it's also, am I able to execute the transformation again or on my own data? It's more than for workflows. And yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so we have how much time still? A few minutes. Yeah, a few. So we have a few minutes to talk about the whole system. Yeah. So in terms of, you know, governance, what type of systems, system incentives, structures, sustainability, and so on can be brought to play, can actually affect the challenges that we have just discussed.
Okay. I think maybe also to summarize a lot of points we discussed, for example, this I do not have time. So I think many things are addressable with automation, because automation has a direct benefit for the user, because things go faster. So that it saves them time, which they honor directly. And a side effect of automation is standardization, because it's easier to automate things in a standard way. This is maybe not a priority of the researcher who uses the optimization, but it's a secondary effect which has the long-term benefit of producing fair data. And I think this is maybe the most important, most realistic way to implement fair, by automate more. And this starts with what is happening on the bench, because a robot does not complain about documenting properly, and it ends with post-processing pipelines. They just say, I was on a beamline, there is a library or even a UI tool, and I click generate default analytics, and there they are. I will take this. If this is enough, I will take it. And yeah, this is maybe the backdoor for fair data is automatization.
I agree with you, but I would add also that the governance is very important, which you mentioned, to have, even though federated, so it's good that there are some diversities within, for example, if materials commons would be overarching system, but it would be good to have something overarching, because if we will have CAPEX, if we will have diadem and Czech national data infrastructure, and everyone will just look at around that this is not compatible, NFDI in Germany, this will not work. We need some umbrella authority, like in genomics, like in astronomy, to which brings certain level of kind of label, and that yes, these are the tools which are used in European or ideally global community, and this is what I should use. If it's fragmented, it's very difficult to explain to especially young people that you should not go to Cloud Code and create your own algorithm again. You should simply have a look. This is what others are using, and it's compatible with the system.
Yeah, on my side, I would think that at some point we also have to think about not overdoing, because we could fall in the temptation that we want to describe a semantic that is basically putting the entire world into an order, and which is an exercise of consistency that is more philosophical than practical. So at some point, I think we should never forget that we need to solve practical problem. We have a principle of reality that is limited resources and etc. So personally, I saw what we did at the ESRF, where we have a very solid set of metadata that can allow us to do a lot of basically what is needed, but maybe in the data itself, we're not going to look for the essence. It's still quite convenient. So maybe at some point, the approach of the ambition and the learning by doing and implementing things while they are needed and they are useful should come together. And definitely, I think that we cannot do that without public money, because at some point we are in a phase where this is not generating direct income. So it will be difficult to finance in a different way that using grant money, but then when the infrastructure will be in place, will be such an acceleration that the return of investment, I think, is without any doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe that brings me to sort of one final question is moving beyond the data, as I said, where our knowledge is expressed, right, in the age of AI and so on, becoming more and more important. For example, capturing, why we looked at a sample, why we took a certain decision, why we moved on to something else. These are the metadata, yeah, that in future we could maybe also consider even more important, because reading stuff off documents, machine can do. Knowing why we went from A to B, unless I put it down somewhere, the machine definitely can't do that. Right? So
maybe I would add also having a negative results. I mean, a well done,
similar, yeah.
properly performed experiments which completely fail.
Yeah, I would also agree that in the age of LLMs, the processing is becoming cheap, becoming scalable, but doing it at scale provides a long-term memory solution. And I think now there is really the chance that the semantic interoperable storing of knowledge is what is required to run an agent that is really connecting many experts and not just one expert in his contained environment. So I hope we will create this common knowledge infrastructure.
Thank thank you very much again. I think we are just in time or out of time. Any questions from the audience before I hand over? But I think there's now a session also to. Oh, we have online maybe. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll hand over.
Oh, yes, I can. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yes. No, no. Yes, sorry. No, what is a metadata in material science? Because when we observe, for example, an alloy, we need to know all the process of the providers. So there is a lot of details. And why not just considering the data that are associated to a paper, and then all the metadata are the paper? It is my question.
I would be very careful speaking about the paper because paper is a researcher's interpretation of the data. But I fully agree. Paper, article, research article is a interpretation, usually personal or a collective, but a small collective interpretation of the data. It may be completely wrong. That's one thing, but your original question was very good. We are using a term metadata, which in some industries is never used because everything is data. So in this way, I fully agree. All this context, it's data. So I would agree with it.
For me, metadata is the part of the data that is used to index the data. And that may vary from every perspective.
Any practical advice for beginners as users of ontologies? Well, this is a big topic. It depends on the user for what purpose. So obviously, in many ways, from a user perspective, an ontology is a resource simply for checking on how things are defined, how things relate to each other, what type of pattern, again, could be used to describe my data.
I would actually add that for the end user, it's not something you should use. It's more for data stewards or those who are creating the patterns and JSON schemas. So JSON schemas should.
So maybe a philosophical question here. So imagine you have all the data that is generated in the world, collected in your software, in your platform, whatever you want to call it. What are you individually going to do with it?
Well, I can start, but I will be a little bit off topic because I'm immunologist.
I don't think it's off topic.
Just that I'm not originally material scientist. It would be lovely because I would, for example, take an immune cell and I would already know a lot of things about this cell, which I, even by reading literature and so on, I'm currently unable. So my hypothesis would be much stronger based on all the, if I have, you said hypothetically, I have all the data which were generated. So I can ask very quickly prompt to get the information. And then based on it, I can very quickly do the new hypothesis about the development of diseases. As I said, this is a little bit off topic, but I think it fits in your question.
Okay. I can maybe answer.
Any other opinion?
So I can maybe answer from if I would redo my PhD in a perfect world with all this in place you mentioned. I would, first of all, I did 100 try and error experiments and maybe find a little bit better solution. In this perfect world, I would have all the papers, all the publications already consumed before even initializing my optimization algorithm that is connected to my self-driving lab. It means my robot maybe is also sampling 100 samples, but already starting on the best candidates published ever for the material class. That means with the same effort, I will find a new global maximum, and I of course publish my new results. So the next PhD in my field will start where I have stopped. This would be my vision. I mean, it was about stretchable conductors, and he could do, for example, flexible electronics with that, or maybe for smartphones that don't break if you throw them down.
And in my case, you're painful. If you are moving in the morning, the stiffness can be sorted most probably.
I think there are many cases. I mean, we discussed recently, or you know, again, crystallography, right? You have crystallography data sets, but then also crystallization is a different field, and so I think what is still kind of quite difficult to, or takes a bit of work, you know. So I take one of these crystal structures, and I want to crystallize it under certain conditions, right? So there are lots of papers and patents and so on about these. They are disconnected from the structure. So finding out, okay, I want to now make this, yeah, for whatever purpose, I can't just type it in. How do I best do it? Yeah. If I had all the data like this, I could just type it in. Now I have to still do quite a lot of collection of papers and blah, blah. So you gain time for getting knowledge. You gain, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you gain time. Yeah. We have a question here.
No, it's not a question. It's a different opinion. So having so much data is too much. Being too much is useless. So the next step will be to find a way to select data and to get what I need. Otherwise, too much data is useless. This is my opinion. No. Sorry? I can understand very quickly that is too much. And if I understand that is too much, I'll try to find a way to filter it and to be in a volume that is affordable for me. Too much data is equal with too less data. Useless. So, yes.
Thank you. So I think we are final comments, but I'll leave it to the organizers to intervene if we need to finish.
No, it was to see if I remember my comment. It was yes, all the data. Sorry. It will come.
You will dream it even further. Somehow you got the job for where's the next one? Thank you so much.
Yes, so I have something directly related to what I just heard in terms of all data that would be available to pre-select. How can you prevent that platform or the space to be polluted by bad or irrelevant data being open?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Also in the context of, again, AI. So this is already, I think, a big challenge that machine learning or whatever AI produced, for example, again, crystal structures, should they be even there? Because it becomes quite difficult to know which is which.
I would say that, I mean, the F for findability is also a filter ability. And I think that's important. I would say 1,000 papers are much for a single researcher, but if you extract all data numerically, it's not much data. So, and if that means if you can filter quantitative for papers in a certain field by saying I'm only interested in tensile tests where the maximum strength was beyond this level and the material class was that, you can already narrow down a lot of this data set to the relevant. But of course the quality is a different chapter. But also here, the only strong instrument against LLM hallucinating data is reasoning. It could be human reasoning, could be logic, formal logic reasoning, but it must be any reasoning on data.
Yeah. I think we have here two. One reaction is one of it is actually exactly the problem of interpretation of analyzed data rather than data. Yeah? So the analysis Wild West is rearing its ugly head. Mixed metaphors here. But the other is it brings us back to replacing FAIR by FET, which is trustworthy data.
But I would add that if the data is fair, it is also more likely you spot errors, could be intentional or non-intentional ones. I mean, if someone has a semiconductor published and it just publishes the final measurement result, what should you do? Maybe you lack of the crystal structure, maybe you lack of the exact experimental setup, characterization method, characterization metadata. It's all missing. If you have this information, you can maybe spot a logical error in it, or a measurement mistake, anything. So fairness could, not must, could improve also trustability.
On that note, we have to end somewhere. So thank you so much again, everyone. Thanks for your participation.